Just before dawn on July 11th, 1804, two rowboats crossed the Hudson River, separately to a ledge below the cliffs at Weehawken, New Jersey. In one boat sat the Vice President of the United States. In the other, the man who had built the country's financial system and written most of the essays that talked a skeptical public into ratifying its constitution. Two of the most educated men in the Western world, then. Products of the Enlightenment, lawyers both, men whose entire careers were made of words. And the dispute between them was also made of words. A letter in an Albany newspaper reporting that at a dinner party, Alexander Hamilton had explicable opinion of Aaron Burr. That was the wound. A second-hand sentence about a dinner party. The technology available to them for resolving it was this: stand a few paces apart at sunrise and fire pistols at each other. Burr's ball caught Hamilton above the hip. He died the next afternoon. And here's the thing you have to resist, watching this from the last page of the history book, the urge to call it madness. It wasn't madness. It was etiquette, a formal, rule-bound, socially respected system for settling disagreements between gentlemen, and versions of it had governed disputes for most of human history. The strange event isn't the duel. The strange event is what came after. The arrangement you live inside right now, so completely that you've never once noticed how bizarre it is. Two people who despise each other, saying words at volume, and both going home alive. That arrangement has a design. Somebody built it, surprisingly recently. And it is much, much weirder than the pistols. Tim Urban calls the operating system that ran all of that. The duel and nearly everything before it. The power games have one rule, and you already know it, because every animal on Earth is born knowing it. Everyone can do whatever they want, if they have the power to do so. The bear can eat the rabbit if it can catch it. That's the whole rule book. There's no referee to appeal to, no such thing as unfair. There's only stronger and weaker. And the entire sweep of recorded history is mostly that rule playing out at scale. Golems fighting golems, with the biggest, meanest golem running things until a bigger one showed up. And before we get superior about it, remember what the last episode taught us, because it lands hard here. Golem mode wasn't stupidity. For thousands of years, it was the correct answer. Because if your neighbors have formed a giant and you haven't, you're finished. Urban calls it the catch-22 of our species. The biggest threat to humanity has always been low-rung humanity. And low-rung humanity persisted because it was the best available defense against exactly that threat. Your instincts were tuned by that arms race. Every one of us ships from the factory ready to play the power games at a moment's notice, which is what makes the next part so unlikely. A few hundred years ago, the last page and a half of the 1,000-page book, a group of thinkers proposed editing the rule, not abolishing self-interest. They were far too realistic for that, just changing the ending. Everyone can do whatever they want, that part stays, as long as it doesn't harm anyone else. Urban calls the system built on the edited rule the liberal games, and the old aphorism states its whole logic in one line. Your right to swing your arms ends where the other person's nose begins. Look at what the edit actually asks you, because it's a strange bargain. You surrender the freedom to oppress, and in exchange you get freedom from oppression. You hand in the cudgel, and the deal is that everyone else hands in theirs. And once the cudgel is off the table, something remarkable happens to ambition. It doesn't die, it reroutes. If I can't take what you have, I have to offer you something you want more. If I can't seize power, I have to convince you to vote it to me. If I can't silence the man I despise, I am left with exactly one weapon. I have to out-argue him in public where everyone can watch me try. The founders who wrote that bargain into a constitution knew the launch was compromised, the full set of rights applied. At first, to white men, and the country has been fighting over the gap between the promise and the practice ever since. Urban's point, and ours, isn't that the machine arrived perfect. It's that the machine was the first one ever built that contained the tools for its own repair. And the strangest market the rewrite created wasn't the one for goods. It was the one for ideas. Free speech is the rule that says, Beliefs compete the way products do. Anyone can sell. Nobody can be forced to buy. And bad ideas go bankrupt in public instead of ruling in private. Here's what that machine can do. The writer Jonathan Rauch describes what it meant to be gay in America in 1960. Barred from government work, hunted by police for sport, condemned as evil by the church, sick by the doctors, criminal by the law, and rejected at the most vulnerable age by your own parents. A minority that's small, hated that thoroughly, has never once in the power games had a move. No golem that tiny wins a fight. But the liberal games had installed a different weapon, and Rauch names it. In ones and twos, then in streams, then in cascades, gay people talked. They argued, they explained, they showed up and let the old claims meet actual lives. And under open argument, the claims did what false inventory does in a market. They collapsed. Within 2 generations, the country changed its mind, not because anyone seized a palace, but because a conversation was legal and couldn't be stopped. That is the trick's whole boast. It hands the powerless, the one lever that has ever reliably beaten power without becoming it. So if the trick is this good, why does every generation, including yours, itch to switch it off? Because the trick is unnatural and your body knows it. Your instincts are native speakers of the power games. The liberal games are a second language learned late, spoken with an accent, and under stress you revert. When an idea you hold sacred gets attacked in the open market, remember the test from episode 2. Your threat system doesn't register commerce, it registers harm. And when the system asks you to defend the speech of someone whose views disgust you, it isn't asking for tolerance. It's asking you to protect the porch light your instincts most want smashed. Of course it feels wrong. It felt wrong to everyone who ever kept the bargain, which is precisely why the bargain keeps needing to be kept on purpose. There's a second thing the trick can't do, and last episode already showed it to you. The law can stop the government from punishing your speech. It cannot stop a room from punishing it. Urban's phrase for the American arrangement is that you're so free, you're free to be unfree, free to build echo chambers inside the open society, little kingdoms with tariff schedules where the First Amendment holds perfectly and nobody says what they think anyway. A country can have flawless speech laws and still fall silent, one room at a time, because the mustache court doesn't need a statute. It just needs the people in the room. And here's the fragile part. Rauch points out that the written constitution is just words on paper. The real system is a dense web of unwritten rules, norms about listening, about not punishing honest error, about answering speech with speech. Urban's image is masonry. The laws are the bricks, but the norms are the mortar. Nobody can repeal the mortar. It just crumbles one dinner table and one comment section at a time whenever enough people decide that this once deserves the cudgel instead of an argument. The trick has no enforcement mechanism deeper than the people inside it. It is load-bearing etiquette, exactly as binding as the duel was, and exactly as abandonable. Now, the test, and it isn't whether you believe in free speech, because everyone says yes to that. The test is a specific face. You're the one. The public voice that makes your jaw set, the one whose every sentence lands on you as this is different. This isn't speech. This is damage. Notice the shape of that feeling. It doesn't arrive as hatred. It arrives as clarity, a calm moral certainty that the line obviously falls just past your opinions and just short of theirs. I'll go first. I have a mute button I press tomorrow. For a voice I could name, and I can produce excellent reasons. I've noticed the reasons show up about half a second after the wish, briefcases in hand, like the attorney from episode 2 reporting for work. That feeling of clarity is the oldest feeling there is. Every censor in history had it. Not one of them experienced themselves as the villain. Every single one experienced themselves as the person finally drawing a reasonable line. The trick, the whole unnatural, magnificent trick, comes down to this. It only exists if it protects speech that feels like harm to someone. And the someone is counting on today is you. So we have the trick. It's written down, it's lawyered, it's 2.5 centuries old, and yet, look around. The arguing that was supposed to make us smarter is making us dumber. Both markets are still open, but something's gone strange in the one for ideas. Here's a clue about what. In 1988, in a first grade classroom, a teacher held a mock election and counted votes out of a shoebox. And the result was 20 to 1. 6-year-olds, not one of them knew a single policy. Every one of them knew which side was the good guys. Where does that knowledge come from? And what happens to a country where politics stops being a set of opinions and becomes the answer to who are you? Next time, welcome to Political Disney World.